Well, thank you for the invitation to talk with you. Sorry that I couldn't have been there in person. Um, what I wanted to say in a very brief period here is that I believe design thinking is a much bigger deal than one might imagine listening to or reading about design thinking as it's being presented in the business world. Um, the idea of design and design thinking, design practice, design research, all of these different dimensions of design are quite broad and deep and rich in ways that you don't really get, I think, from the kinds of descriptions that you might read about or hear about in this sort of design thinking model that's being presented. My background is as an architect, and I've practiced architecture. I have a PhD in social systems design, a degree that I got to design, a one-off degree at Berkeley. I had gone to Berkeley to work and study with Christopher Alexander, and it turned out that while I was there, it was sort of just at the beginning of the decline of something called the design methods movement that had been this collaboration of designers, design educators in both Europe and North America uh, around developing or attempts to develop uh, approaches to design that would bring some kind of rationality and logic to what people felt was entirely too intuitive and unformed in some ways. And what was occurring was that designers were um, beginning to work with very complex and consequential design uh, projects that really did need some kind of, uh, I guess, a rationality um, and a manageable sort of process applied uh, so that it was no longer something that would be considered like a craft or an art, but that would be more of a kind of a professional approach. And a lot of the design fields weren't necessarily considered to be disciplined in that way. So this design methods movement, um, as I said, was an attempt to bring some kind of discipline to the design process. As an architect, I had sort of had a lot of background in design theory and design methods and design approaches and programming design briefs, that sort of thing. So I was a little bit surprised at how people thought that this kind of design thinking approach was so new or radically new. But anyway, uh, I would say that after my experiences with studying with Horst Riddle and Wes Churchman and being introduced to these ideas of wicked problems and systems thinking and the systems approach, and meeting people like Herbert Simon and others, at Russ Akoff, I began to really appreciate that as an architect from my own design background. I had a very limited perspective of what the potential of design was and what the challenges for designers were. And I now sort of have this perspective that the ability to design was a competency that really began to distinguish human activity from the very beginning, sort of defined who we were as human beings. This ability to bring things into existence that didn't exist before to serve our own needs and purposes. And now it's interesting to see that scientists are making the case to call the present era the Anthropocene era, the human-centered era, because they've discovered that the natural world isn't so natural anymore because of the effects of human activity over the past many centuries. And that, in fact, you could say that the scientists nowadays will more and more become design critics, trying to describe and explain all the different entanglements, the unintended consequences as well as intended consequences of design activity, of human activity has been. So those are kind of the bookends, I guess, of what I think design is. It's to this point now where the world that we live in really is becoming more and more of an artificial world. It's not a natural world. It's a consequence of human intention, intentional behavior. So it's a big deal, and it's something that we have to really take seriously. We have to begin to develop scholarship in the same way as scholarship has been developed for science and art over the past centuries. And we've only just begun to look at design in the same way and try to explore its full breadth and depth, and to really appreciate what the challenges are for designers. And it just, I guess it concerns me when I see something like the design thinking movement come along, and that the public and even people in governmental agencies and that begin to think that this kind of commoditized form of design really defines what design is all about. And thankfully, in a number of other areas, people have begun to appreciate and explore design as a way of thinking and acting in the world, and that it's probably as important as the humanities and the sciences have been, and the arts have been to our human development. And I would say for myself, it's even more consequential in that as Genesis is ongoing, that as designers we continue to aim evolution and affect human evolution, and that we really need to get good at it. We really need to begin to appreciate what that means and what that demands of us. So anyway, I'll just end now saying that design is a really big deal, and it's not 4 steps that you can kind of sell to commercial clients as a way to guarantee successful products. And again, thanks for the invitation. And hope to see many of you in the coming years and have much longer discussions. Thanks.